The Impact of Narcissistic Manipulation, Part 2. Let's do it. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. If it's your first time here, my name is Tamie M. Joyce. I'm the founder of Tamie M Coaching, and I run a powerful 8-week transformational coaching program called the Freedom Class, specific to healing and recovery from codependency and narcissistic abuse. If that's of interest to you, be sure to stick around till the end of the video, and I'll tell you how you can learn more about my programs. Today's video is part 2 of a 3-part series called The Impact of Narcissistic Manipulation. If you want to watch part 1, you can do so here. Now that said, let's dive a little deeper into narcissistic manipulation and the detrimental impact it has on you. To begin with, I think it goes without saying that although narcissistic manipulation can be a very effective strategy when it comes to controlling another person, both emotionally, as well as controlling how they behave and the choices and decisions they make, it does absolutely zero to support or promote your well-being. In other words, it does nothing to contribute in any way to you becoming a happy, healthy, peaceful, joyful, productive, or otherwise well-adjusted person. In fact, it does quite the opposite. Narcissistic manipulation is specifically designed to systematically erode your sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and progressively more and more so over time. And this is unfortunately the sad reality for many people who are currently being, or have historically been, narcissistically manipulated and abused. More often than not, their self-worth has been utterly annihilated by the chronic manipulation and abuse. Negative reinforcement, manipulation, control, and the ensuing punishment if and when you don't comply are without question fundamentally coercive as well as abusive tactics. And for clarity, some examples of narcissistic manipulation through coercive control include, but are not limited to, things like yelling, name-calling, spewing insults or otherwise ridiculing you, attempting to cause you to question your own sanity and perception of reality by gaslighting you, disrespecting your boundaries, invading your privacy, and of course, punishing you for not going along with whatever it is that they want, while also working overtime trying to control your life. Further, you'll know it's narcissistic manipulation when it includes unpredictable or random positive reinforcement. Like, for example, you're never quite sure when you're going to be on the receiving end of some small kindness, while you can regularly count on being targeted, both passively and aggressively. And because this lack of predictability creates high levels of fear, stress, and uncertainty, you naturally find yourself filled with anxiety, walking on eggshells, afraid to do or say anything that might trigger the narcissist. To the extent that the narcissistic manipulator uses random, inconsistent, and unpredictable reinforcement as a means of control, confusion, fear, anxiety, and stress will be dramatically increased by the unstable, uncertain, and unpredictable nature of the relationship and the environment all of this toxic coercive control creates. Again, narcissistic manipulation is both coercive and anxiety-producing. Moreover, it's intensely frustrating, which naturally creates pent-up hostility and anger that the target has to live with in addition to fear, stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. And don't kid yourself, living with these toxic feelings takes a substantial emotional toll as well as physical toll on you and your health. And the truth is, the detrimental effects of all of this fear, anxiety, stress, frustration, and confusion are only going to get progressively worse, not better, over time. So why would anyone in their right mind stand still and put up with this nonsense for more than 5 minutes? Well, what many people don't realize is that targets of narcissistic manipulation have been programmed to blame themselves and therefore often feel responsible for causing the negative feelings and reactions within themselves, in addition to feeling responsible for the negative feeling state of their abuser. If only I had or hadn't done or said this, or done or said this differently. As if there's anything we can do or be different that could put a dent in what's going on with the narcissistic manipulator. And the longer this goes on, the more the self-doubt, self-blame, and deep feelings of shame and unworthiness become a fundamental part of their personal identity. And thus, the vicious cycle continues. Now comment below and tell me whether or not you've experienced any of these detrimental effects of having been narcissistically manipulated. Let me know in the comments section below. And if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, there's a link in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Here's another interesting fact about the detrimental impact of narcissistic manipulation and how these empathy-impaired emotional manipulators get away with what they do for as long as they do. The confusion that develops in the target about the narcissistic manipulator's true motives and agenda is often an integral part of the manipulative control. The end game for the narcissistic manipulator is to advance his or her own self-interest with little to no regard for the well-being or best interest of the target. And a skilled narcissistic manipulator will disguise their actual motives with surprisingly effective and disarming reassurance, such as, you know, I only want you to be happy. I'm on your side. I'm only doing this for your own good. I'm really just trying to help you. And as a result, the target of narcissistic manipulation walks away in an absolute state of confusion when this kind of manipulation occurs, especially within the context of a family of origin or romantic relationship. In these relationships, there's typically a general, albeit incredibly naive, expectation that love will prevail over the selfish and self-centered agenda of the narcissistic manipulator. After all, we don't expect the people who are supposed to have our back and love us to deliberately manipulate, harm, or otherwise exploit us. But in reality, some of the most painful and destructive experiences of manipulative relationships that I have seen with clients, as well as experienced personally, have in fact occurred in family relationships. What's more, until you're actually ready to face the reality of your situation, you're probably going to use denial for the powerful defense mechanism it is in an attempt to protect yourself from the painful truth. In a case like this, the target is often deeply enmeshed in a sustained manipulative pattern before they become fully aware of the negative toll the narcissistic manipulation is having on their emotional, psychological, as well as their physical health. After all, more often than not, these patterns are set up in early childhood. So for many of us, unlearning what has always been the norm can take a lot of work. For example, in family as well as romantic relationships, the expectation or assumption of love can cloud an accurate perception of the toxic manipulation that actually exists. It sounds like this. I know my family love me and do and say the things they do because they really only want the best for me. Or, I take it because I understand that they themselves had such difficult and traumatic childhoods. As if a painful childhood is reason enough to give someone a pass when it comes to manipulating, exploiting, or otherwise abusing and targeting you. But sadly, this is the kind of thing that a disempowered target who has been victimized by emotional manipulation and psychological abuse their whole entire lives is likely to think and say while still in denial, because frankly, the truth is just too painful to face head on. Again, until we're ready to actually commit to doing the healing and recovery work we need to do. And this clearly speaks to the very real erosive effects of narcissistic manipulation on the target's sense of self-worth and self-esteem. These destructive effects can cause the target to internalize the blame and see themselves and their so-called shortcomings as the main reason that the relationship is so problematic. Rebuilding our fractured or altogether shattered sense of self is without question the biggest challenge when the denial starts to lift and we begin to face reality for what it is. There's nothing easy or pain-free about that process, but I can tell you it's a necessary one if you ever want to change your susceptibility to being emotionally manipulated and psychologically abused by people who land on the spectrum of destructive narcissism. There's more to it though. As a target of narcissistic manipulation, the confusion you grapple with also stems from the manipulator's carefully disguised motives. Oftentimes, the target's own fear and denial, along with the naivete that accompanies our highly empathic nature until we do our work, is the very thing that keeps a target from recognizing the manipulative tactics being used to control them. Confusion about what the narcissistic manipulator really means or truly wants is the inevitable result of participating in a silent contract, which, among other things, works to keep the narcissist's manipulative agenda hidden and obscured. Also, it's important to remember that narcissistic manipulators are generally quite adept at, and therefore quite comfortable, lying outright as well as lying by omission. If it serves them, a narcissistic manipulator will absolutely be willing to do and say whatever it takes in order to disguise and hide their true motives and all the relationship crimes they've committed over time. Lying to shift blame, divert attention, or cover their own ass is an absolute non-issue for a master manipulator, such as a narcissist. And as the vice of manipulation tightens, you're likely only going to feel more and more frustrated and dissatisfied with the way the relationship makes you feel. And a big part of the frustration is your absolute inability to make the manipulator happy or win their approval, no matter how hard you try. So if this speaks to you and you're holding out hope that one day you'll be able to get it right or something will change, know this. Any manipulative relationship, by definition, serves the comfort and well-being of the manipulator only. Therefore, naturally, you'll only become increasingly more and more frustrated and dissatisfied over time as your most fundamental and basic needs continue to go unmet, or more often than not, are entirely ignored. The problem with this is, when our fundamental needs perpetually go unmet, they become more amplified, not less. And this, of course, turns into you being accused of being needy. Another example of how blame is shifted onto the target of narcissistic manipulation, as you're made to be responsible for all that's wrong in the relationship. It's a classic example of how a child grows up being neglected, if not outright abused emotionally or otherwise. Naturally, the child grows into a troubled teen or young adult, with mountains of unresolved issues and trauma to contend with, while simultaneously receiving little to no healthy guidance or support in terms of how to navigate life successfully. The narcissistic manipulators, along with their enablers, then have the audacity to criticize, blame, shame, judge, and gossip about the young adult they've been allowed to target and harm for decades, as if they bear zero responsibility in the outcome and very real struggles and challenges the young adult is facing. Now, don't get me wrong. There comes a time where we have to grow up and take radical responsibility for ourselves, our lives, and our own well-being. If we have work to do, it's up to us to take the reins and do the work. But let's be honest, you have to be pretty sick to target and abuse a child on any level and then blame, shame, and criticize them for struggling to get their legs under them as they grapple with the very real consequences of the abuse you yourself inflicted. Pretty sick stuff. But it's the harsh reality for many of us who grew up in highly dysfunctional family systems where all manner of neglect and abuse were enabled and normalized. Those of you who identify as being the family scapegoat know exactly what I'm talking about. What's more is victims of narcissistic manipulation who continue to give it their all in an attempt to improve or change their relationship with their abuser are understandably frustrated. If the victim attaches his or her self-worth to the narcissistic manipulator's approval, or worse yet, their unwillingness to change, the victim's self-esteem is going to take a beating. And naturally, chronic and intense feelings of low self-worth, along with fear, anxiety, and frustration, all lead to pent-up hostility, bitterness, and resentment. And underneath all of this is a whole world of pain. The excruciating pain that goes along with years, if not decades, of rejection, criticism, and all the psychological warfare that is the reality of narcissistic manipulation. Even though targets of this form of emotional and psychological abuse may suppress their anger, as well as their deep-seated feelings of sorrow and grief, fearing negative consequences if he or she were to risk speaking up, The toxic emotional and physical consequences of carrying this kind of pent-up hostility take a toll, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and spiritually. Don't kid yourself. We pay a very heavy price for perpetual exposure to highly manipulative people who feel entitled to target us on any level. When we were kids, we didn't have a choice. We're adults now. We get to choose. So if this speaks to you, hear me. You can take your power back. It's time now. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. But don't stop now. I have well over 100 more videos right here on YouTube for you to watch to help you better understand the detrimental effects of narcissistic abuse, and more importantly, learn what you need to do now to heal from the abuse so you can start living your best life in peace, confidence, and freedom. And if you want to go deeper with me, go to TamieMCoaching.com and learn about my unique, tried and true process garnered over decades of experience, and learn how you can become my client.